All right, man, peace. So, brothers, we can pretty much all agree that the performance that James Harden, the superstar guard of the Houston Rockets, put on in the month of January was nothing less than historic. Historically superlative, as a matter of fact. Historic to the level where he is now being compared to the greatest scorers in the history of the NBA. His name is now being mentioned with names like Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan, and Kobe Bryant. The month that he had in January has people asking if James Harden is as great a scorer as Michael Jordan was. So now Mr. Stephen A. Smith felt compelled to chime in and act as an advocate for one of his old friends, Kobe Bryant. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
All right, let's keep it going here in the association, guys. Despite losing to the 76ers last night, James Harden had his 20th straight game with 30 or more points. He didn't even play in the fourth quarter. He joined Wilt Chamberlain as the only players in NBA history with 30 points scored in 20 consecutive games. So let's take a look at Harden's elite company here. Harden and Wilt with almost identical numbers and points per game, but Harden playing significantly less minutes per game. Stephen A.
Now, brothers, let's keep one thing in mind as we look at these stats. Basically, they're trying to create a cross-generational comparison between James Harden and Wilt Chamberlain. And as we all know, the game of basketball was almost completely different in Wilt Chamberlain's day as opposed to today. Back in Wilt Chamberlain's day, there was no three-point line. The entire offense was centered around getting the basketball to the big man. In today's game, of course, the offense is predicated on having great three-point shooters. And a player like a James Harden, who's a jack of all trades and pretty much a master of none, is allowed to exploit the alterations that have been pushed on the defense where they can no longer really pressure the offensive player to the level where he does not even have to have a post-up game. All he needs is a great face-up game, which he has, a great handle, and he could pull up off the dribble. And if you're given carte blanche, a proverbial green light to take whatever shot that you want, like James Harden is given, yes, he can put up numbers like this. I don't think that he's the only player who can do this. I think that there are probably about 8 or 9 players in the NBA that if they were given the type of green light that James Harden has, they could put up numbers in this range. Maybe not quite what James Harden is doing, but somewhere in this range, they could do it as well.
Is James Harden the best offensive player since MJ?
No. James Harden is not even the best offensive player today. Steph Curry is a better offensive player than James Harden. All you have to do is look at his proficiency and efficiency numbers. Also, Kevin Durant is a better offensive player than James Harden. The best scoring wings of the last 30 years, when we take into account proficiency and efficiency, are Michael Jordan, Kevin Durant, and Kobe Bryant.
No, I'm not gonna give him the edge over Kobe yet.
Neither would I.
Kobe was something special. There's no question about it. There's a reason why we mention MJ, we mention Kobe.
Well, Kobe wants you to mention him whenever you mention Michael. That's why he copied Michael Jordan's game.
I will acknowledge this. If you want to say offensive player, James Harden's in the conversation because he's phenomenal. And not just in shooting the basketball, putting the ball on the floor, mid-range game, long-range game, step back, free throw shooting.
I would love to see what type of numbers James Harden would put up if they took away the stretch 4. If he played in an offense similar to what Michael Jordan played in back in the late 80s, where you had a power forward and a center in the lane waiting for you, and when your defender could put their hands on you. I would like to see what type of numbers he would put up back then.
Getting to the free throw line. He's a magician on the offensive side of the ball. I think he's the most explosive offensive player in basketball today because
I think that he's given the most leeway of any offensive player in basketball today. If we're just talking about skill set, Kyrie Irving is the number 1 offensive player in the game today. He can do everything exceptionally well. And he's proficient, and he does not need the referees, and he does not travel.
Because consistently he has to do what he has to do, and he has to carry a load, and Mike D'Antoni and his offensive system facilitates James Harden being able to do that. When Steph Curry explodes, we know there's no one like him. We get all of that, but still in all, James Harden, in terms of consistency on that level, I would give him the edge. But I'm not going to give him the edge over Kobe Bryant because I think that Kobe Bryant was the closest thing we saw to MJ.
Well, Kobe was able to score at the same clip as James Harden in a much tougher defensive era. So, to me, it's not even that close.
And not only that, Kobe Bryant delivered on the defensive side of the ball for most of his career. When he got
Right, but that's not really the question. The question is Harden the best offensive player since Jordan?
older, that wasn't the case. But for most of his career, he was a force defensively as well.
James Harden's an incredible offensive player,
Yes.
but I think a couple things are going on here. He's become overrated offensively.
Agreed.
Steph Curry's a better offensive player
Agreed.
than James Harden. If Mike D'Antoni was Steph Curry's coach, maybe he'd average 40 points a game. Who knows?
It's possible.
Because he would be shooting all the time. You want Steph Curry just to run pick and roll? Well, he's not as strong as James Harden. He can't get to the basket, finish in the paint the same way James Harden can't get to.
Steph Curry, I believe, for multiple seasons, had the highest conversion rate at the rim of any guard in the NBA.
To the free throw line? Okay, let's say you wouldn't get to the free throw line as much. Do you know how much of a better three-point shooter Steph is than James Harden?
Yes, it's sizable. It's discernible.
It's a different universe of ability.
Well, that much is true.
Right. And now imagine him in a D'Antoni system as the focal point of an offense.
Absolutely. Steph Curry and the Golden State offense, which is pretty much an equal opportunity offense. Now, of course, we know that they run a lot of plays for Steph Curry, but they give the basketball to the hot hand. We don't get the opportunity to find out if there are any other hot hands on the Houston Rockets because James Harden dominates the basketball so much. So I think that, as Max Kellerman has put so aptly, he started to become overrated.
The point is this. A couple things are happening with James Harden. He's such a well-rounded offensive player because he can in this era,
Absolutely. He's very crafty.
The two places you want to score from exclusively, three-point line, the paint. And he is better at shooting from the three-point line in combination with scoring in the paint than anyone else.
The only thing that I will have to disagree with Max Kellerman on is how well-rounded James Harden is. He has no post-up game. He has no mid-range game. Once again, for today's NBA, he's an excellent offensive player.
Sometimes that idea gets conflated with actually being the best offensive player, like it was with Carmelo once upon a time. Particularly when you play for a coach who encourages you to do that all the time, it inflates your numbers. That's one. Two, so I agree with you. I don't think he's as good offensively as Kobe for his era, let alone MJ. Two, I'm sorry. He's played 700-something regular season games, over 100 postseason games. Because the postseason in the NBA is very long. You cannot just limit this conversation to the regular season. When you say offensive player, it is ridiculous to say the highest leverage games don't count at all. In fact, they count more.
That's fair.
Stephen A., here's his three-point shooting in the last three postseasons for a team that relies on this. 30% last year, 28% the year before, 31% the year before, and so they lose.
That's a different argument for another day, not refuting it. Here's where you and I differ. When we bring up the Curry thing, that's all I want to address here. Here's what you have to give credit. We have to take a moment to give credit to Steve Kerr and his coaching staff. You ever see them brothers move the basketball? You see the spacing that they create on a basketball court, the way that they move the basketball, the way that they find Steph Curry because he's adroit at moving without the basketball, running around screens and picks and what have you.
Right, but Stephen A. Smith, the point of them bringing in Chris Paul was so that, at least hypothetically speaking, they could move the ball a little bit more. James Harden is so set in his ways as being a ball dominator. Really, he only wants Chris Paul there to be a co-ball dominator. So therefore, he's very reticent to add any wrinkles to his game. So if you're attempting to take credit away from Steph Curry by saying he's in a great system for him, let's also keep in mind that the year before Steve Kerr got there, Steph Curry led the NBA in all-star voting. So he's been a star for a very long time.
What I'm saying is, if that's your taste, that's your cup of tea, that's cool. But D'Antoni, on many occasions, we find James Harden, and just look at the amount of times he dribbles the basketball, the numbers are exorbitantly high compared to almost everybody else.
Right, but that's how James Harden prefers to play.
You look at James Harden dribble the basketball, lots of times he is in ISO situations.
No doubt.
And so what I'm saying to you is this: Steph Curry in ISO situations wouldn't do that.
How do you know that? That's very, very unfair for you to say, sir, especially in this NBA. Steph Curry has a slightly better handle than James Harden, and his range is better, as well as being a better three-point shooter off the dribble. So Steph Curry, no, he would not be able to lower his shoulder, draw contact, and get the foul call as well as James Harden. But Steph Curry's offensive game is far more diversified than James Harden. Steph Curry is a better mid-range shooter. He's a better finisher at the rim. He's a better free throw shooter. He's a better three-point shooter. So yes, I must agree with Max Kellerman here. If Steph Curry were playing in the D'Antoni system, he'd be putting up just as gargantuan a set of numbers as James Harden. No doubt about it. And probably shooting a better percentage from the field.
This gets
So it's just a different argument.
We are not talking
We're not arguing
about
the same thing.
Right, we're not. We're
Right.
not talking about
Right.
who is scoring. We're talking about offensive player. Remember when I said, I think it was Tom Haverstraw, I apologize if it was someone else, who did the study, when you take away each other all-star from Steph Curry, what happens to the fortunes of the team? They barely change.
Absolutely. When you go all the way back to the 2014-2015 season, before they had Cousins, before they had Kevin Durant, the team had won 67 games. The next year they won 73 games. You can make the case that the Warriors actually have become less proficient with the more superstars that they've added. So the only constant is Steph Curry.
Steph Curry is the one player the team has enormous success when it's just him, let alone when it's him minus KD or Clay or someone else. So the point is this. Hold on, it's not from his defense.
Yeah, but it's from a system.
Oh, yeah, wait a minute. Who's running the system? You're saying...
Absolutely. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, when Steph Curry's out and the Golden State Warriors play 500 basketball over 12 games, they need Steph Curry. But then when he comes back and they win 12 games, 13 games in a row, well, he just happens to play in a great system. No, it does not work like that, Stephen A. Smith. But the point being is this. I agree with Max Kellerman. Harden is probably the most prolific offensive player of this era, but he's not the best. The best offensive player right now is Steph Curry, and the best and most proficient wing is Kevin Durant. But anyway, peace.